Sami Odi, one of Australia's greatest and most sought-after Shiraz producers located in the Barossa Valley in South Australia. For those of you that are new here, my name is Erin Larkin. I'm an Australian wine reviewer and I review the wines of Australia and New Zealand for Robert Parker Wine Advocate. Today I'm doing something a little different. This is the first in a new series for me called Drinking Your Cellar, and these wines are not mine. They came from one of my subscribers, Mick, emailed me and said, Erin, I want to see a video on the Sami Odi wines. I've got them all. What do you want? And I said, thank you so much. That sounds exciting and great. I want the Hoffmann Dallwitz Shiraz because I'm really focused at the moment on the Hoffmann Vineyard and that being a wonderful resource for very high quality fruit, very old vine fruit in the Barossa Valley, one of Australia's great source vineyards. So let's discuss each of these wines. I've got the 21, the 19, the 18 and the 17. Mick didn't have the 20 and I couldn't get the 20 in the time that I had available to me. So we're just going to talk about it. I've tasted it. I know exactly how I feel about it. So it doesn't matter that it's not here. I've got statistics for each of these wines, details on vineyard sourcing, barrels, yields, élevage, bottles, etc. So hopefully with all of this information, we can paint a very clear picture for you about how great these wines are. So starting in wine number 1, we've got the 2021 Hoffmann Dallwitz Shiraz. So let's talk a little bit about the 21 vintage. It was really good winter rains leading into spring, which meant that the vines were in a really good position for healthy flowering and fruit set. We then had a really lovely, long, extended, even season that carried out long into like May, basically. And the wines produced from the 21 season have been really diverse. I thought they would be very, very particular and fine and focused and whatever, but they're not. That some of them are really big. Some of them have got heaps of alcohol. All of them have lots of freshness and gorgeous flavour. It was an exceptional vintage and will go down as one of the greats. Thankfully, the yields were healthy. So this 2021 Hoffmann Dallwitz Shiraz came from the 1927 and the 1888 to 1912 blocks in the Hoffmann Dallwitz Vineyard. These are planted on their own roots, and so they're over 100 years old. It's a pretty amazing thing to consider when you think about everything that those vines have gone through over the last century. There was 22 barrels of this wine made. The yields are 26 to 39 hectolitres per hectare, which is important because old vines and these seasons, there's a little bit of variation in the yields, and I like to sort of see those numbers. It helps give clarity to the vintage conditions. This spent 78 weeks in oak, which is roughly 19 months, and 6,275 bottles were filled. So this wine, there's like a core of raspberry, pomegranate, there's all of these red black cherries, beautiful red supple fruit. It's gorgeous. Wrapped around that is a framework of very fine kind of pliable bendy tannins, chewy, savoury, sits on the back palate, and it's mouth-filling, but it's not a big one. It's 14.7% alcohol. It doesn't feel it. You don't feel this kind of warmth or density in the mouth. It's beautiful. It's big, but it's so beautiful. It's really elegant. It's an exceptional wine. So something I should tell you before I move on to the next vintage, that all the bottles are filled without fining or filtration or sparging. So sparging is the removal of naturally occurring oxygen and CO2 in the wine. And all the transfers are conducted via gravity filling. So he does it in a really old school way, but old school, good school. We like this, and the wines really speak for themselves. So the 2020, which fits in here, was a super low yielding year. So where the yields in 2021 were 26 to 39 hectolitres per hectare, in 2020, the yields were 9 to 17 hectolitres per hectare. Now, we knew that when the vintages were going on. We knew that 2020, it was the second in a series of drought years. 18 was very warm but great. 19 was dry and hot. 2020 was drier and hotter. And they also had a really bad event during flowering, so yields were just shattered. So it's minuscule, the 2020, and I loved it. And I remember looking at the 19 and 20 last year and going, which do I prefer? Because, there's always going to be a preference. And I pointed the 20 just half a point above the 19. I loved them both, but I found the 20 just had a little bit more freshness, a little bit more kind of mouth-filling pleasure. The 19's a brooding beast. So let's talk about the 19. The 19 is from those two same blocks again, the 1927 block, the 1888 to 1912 block, both on own roots. There is a little bit, and I think in Fraser McKinley's notes he says there's a thimbleful of other fruit from Eric's Corner planted in 1996. There was 19 barrels of this wine. The yields were 21 to 27 hectolitres per hectare, so up on 2020, but very much down on 2021. It spent 81 weeks in oak, which is about 20 months, and there was 5,216 bottles. Now, something that I was tossing up whether or not to talk about with you here today is the fact that this bottle is corked. So if we are drinking wines in a restaurant or I'm tasting them for my job, you request a second bottle. You feel sad about the bottle that you've had and you request a second, and usually you're given it. Now, this is very different to what happens when we are drinking at home with wines that we have lovingly collected from producers that we revere, because you can't help a corked bottle. In 2019, you can't call Fraser and say, can I buy another bottle, please? I mean, they're all sold out. We know this. So you endure. You work out whether or not you can deal with the fault, and you look past it. So here, it's quite corked. But I have a very clear memory of what this 2019 was like, and I can see it through all of that. So let's talk about that. So 2019, really hot and dry. The wine was really dense and brooding and muscular. That was the thing for me. The tannins were like this muscular wrap around this core of black fruit. So where the 21 has this gorgeous red fruit luminosity, the 19 was like black fruited and brooding. And you can still see that here. And that's the power of this gorgeous old vine fruit. It's so concentrated, so dense, it kind of lifts itself over this taint, which is not insignificant, actually. Sometimes cork taint it's on a spectrum, right? Sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes it's a lot. This is more than halfway, I would say. But in the mouth, you can feel the density of the tannins. The fruit still got that gorgeous blackberry, black cherry core about it. Still a beautiful wine. It just makes me a little bit sad that it's corked. But that is part of the game, right? That's the gamble. That's what we love. Moving into the next bottle. So this is the 2018 Hoffmann Dallwitz Shiraz. I've been very, very vocal about the 2018 vintage in the Barossa Valley, Margaret River also. But I love the 18 Shiraz from Barossa Valley. And if you had to pin me down and say, what's my favourite vintage, it'd be 18, because the wines then and the wines now have got this gorgeous red fruited vitality about them. They're really muscular and dense. These are big wines from 18, but they're balanced. There's beautiful balance and poise that kind of comes into play. You know, it's just a beauty. So this 2018 wine is from those two same blocks, the 1927 and the 1888 to 1912 block in the Hoffmann Dallwitz Vineyard. There was 23 barrels, which is more than the 2021, which was a great yielding year. This was 22 barrels, 23 barrels, and we say thank you because we love good vintages with good yields. The yields this year were 29 to 38 hectolitres per hectare. It was in oak for 78 weeks. So if we consider these things, statistically, these two wines, the 18 and the 21, are very, very similar. Both in oak for 19 months, 78 weeks each. The yields, 26 to 39 hectolitres per hectare in 21, 29 to 38 hectolitres per hectare in 18, so not dissimilar. And 6,341 bottles filled versus 6,275. So you can see they're not dissimilar. We're very happy about this. It's a beautiful vintage, and the wine is gorgeous. When Mick dropped these wines off, I poured him a tasting bottle of each of them so that, you know, there's no sense giving me wine if you can't taste it. So he can go home and taste those wines. And so, Mick, I'd love to hear what you think about how you went with these bottles. But 2018, what a ripping vintage, what a ripping wine. It's like muscular and savoury and red and vital and fresh and exciting and really, really good. 18's like the blue chip bet in the Barossa. It's awesome. It's really good. Now, yeah, it's really good. There's like black, savoury, charry tannins just dusting the edges of this really beautiful kind of core of fruit. It's a very savoury wine. Kind of like if you're roasting, you know, if you roast a chunk of beef in the oven and you get that gorgeous kind of black just around some of the edges, like a little bit of a charry, sweet charry, sort of sticky, juicy sort of character. This has sort of got that aspect to the tannins. It's really pleasurable. Right, moving on to the 17. 17 was a really challenging vintage in the Barossa and in Eden Valley. It was very wet and cold. Yields were it was a high cropping year. There was lots of fruit. So it was really about producers being very selective with the fruit that they used and working with it in a really sensitive way. So I have found the 17s are really diverse in quality. Some are great and some are awful, in my opinion. They're falling apart now. There's a lot of leather and kind of savoury char and beef brisket and stuff happening. And that's just a factor of the vintage. So you make your own mind up about 17. I have seen some absolute bursters and some that were not as good. So it's really up to you. So in terms of the vineyard sourcing, we have only the 1927 block and the 1888 to 1912 block from the Hoffmann Dallwitz Vineyard. There was 19 barrels. So if we consider 19, 23, 19, 18 for the 2020, which we can't see, and 22 for the 2021. So despite it being high yielding, he was obviously very selective about the fruit that they selected. So the yields this year were 31 to 43 hectolitres per hectare, which is the highest yielding year in the 5 that we're spanning. 4 bottles, 5 vintages on this. 77 weeks in oak, so slightly less than all of the others. That's 19 months, and 4,961 bottles filled. So let's talk about the wine. Here you can see all of the character of 17. It's got the freshly tanned leather. It's got the beef brisket sort of hide character. It's got all of that meat, but it's also got this gorgeous splay of mulberry, blackberry, it's salted licorice. This is a more savoury wine. Very dense, very big, but savoury. So I think these two are kind of stylistically, if you get a producer that's handled 17 well, the two vintages, 17 and 18 side by side, really are a preference situation. I prefer the red fruited vitality, but it doesn't mean that kind of freshly tanned leather, like leather handbag, roast beef sort of quality in the 17s is not also awesome. It's just not my preference, but it's a sensational iteration of what the season was capable of. Savoury, mouth-filling, chunky, very good, very fine. I say chunky and fine in the same sentence. Goes right to the sides of the mouth, but it silks out through the finish. These are really, really beautifully handled wines, and texturally they're super classy. I mean, you may not be a fan of really big Barossa Shiraz, but these have just done it with such elegance and aplomb, and they're really, really wonderful to see. So thanks very much, Mick. Love to see these wines, love to see them in a vertical to see how they're aging. I think that you can probably really comfortably start to drink the 17 and the 18 now. Of course, this is on the early end of the drinking window and you can drink them for many, many more years to come. I would give them at least a decade of primary fruit before they start to move into tertiary, and even then and beyond, no worries. I think that I'm sad about the cork, but if I didn't tell you, it wouldn't be honest. And we all have bottles sealed under cork in our cellar that we love, and that's the risk and the gamble and the excitement of buying them under cork. That's just, it is what it is. It's just, what are you going to do? 2021 could not have looked more pure, more pristine, more exciting, more svelte, more long than I could have hoped. It's awesome. So anyway, Sami Odi, drinking your cellar. Very grateful, Mick. Thanks very much, and I look forward to the next one.